No, I didn't do it. I've judged for you folks before, so you may well know me. I've been photographing since the late 70s, although I took a break for about 10 or 15 years when my photo gear got stolen, not once, but twice.
Oh.
So I figured I wasn't supposed to be doing photography, but eventually I came back. And my wife and I both judge. We're both involved in 3 photo clubs. Cam Nats, which is our primary club, Somerset, and then in a community like yours, we live in Canal Walk, so we have a club here. We also teach photo workshops up at the New Jersey Audubon Center in Bernardsville, and we'll be starting those up again in September. We do them once a month through the school year. So there you have it.
Thank you.
Phil, I can say that you were last here on May 28th of 2020 when you judged us on motion.
Okay, you know, I kind of remember that.
I don't remember that.
Vaguely, although all my memories are vague now, you know, at this age.
Join the club.
Right, join the club, right?
What I'd like to do at this
You're
time.
not alone with that problem.
What I'd like to do at this time is mute all. It's going to be a soft mute, so you could always unmute yourselves, and then ask our judge, Phil, to unmute himself.
Okay.
Let's Mark, just a question. If we do unmute ourselves, we're allowed to ask a question?
That's up to Phil. It's his.
Oh.
Well, I mean, usually people save questions for the end.
Okay.
And
okay.
You know, if I do something stupid, if I misjudge something and, you know, disqualify something that shouldn't be disqualified, please unmute yourself. Hopefully that won't be necessary.
Okay. Thank you.
But you'll take questions at the end, right?
Sure, no problem.
Thank you.
Okay, I've unmuted myself, so I think we're in business.
Okay. Yeah, let me just set this up. And we're going to start with open group 1.
Okay, open group 1. Group 1 is the beginners and intermediate group?
Correct.
Okay, got it.
Okay, here we go. And there are only 4 here.
So this is the one where you want me to do just
right.
Okay, just a top award. Okay.
Right. On the beach, on the phone.
Okay. Well, it's an interesting portrait. I mean, it's heavily processed, but that's clearly intentional. It gives it kind of a cartoonish, almost a sculptural look, kind of like one of those sculptures you see at the grounds for sculpture that look like people, except this is a person. It's creative. For me, at least, it's not that pleasant in appearance. It's a little bit harsh for my taste. But certainly, especially for the beginners class, it's a creative approach. I'll give it an 8.
We do.
Oh yeah. I'm sorry, 6 and 7. Thank you. 7. I'll see it again.
Okay. Needs repair.
Well, that it does. You know, the technical qualities are pretty good. It looks sharp. The whites look properly exposed, maybe a little bit overexposed when I look down in this area, but they're pretty close. I'll give it the benefit of the doubt. It's not that compelling an image. I mean, I suppose you could do something interesting with that subject. You know, maybe a close-up of this door and the area around it. But I think, as is true in a lot of these cases, less is more. And I think less here would work better, picking out some interesting detail. I almost don't know where to look in the image. And as I always like to do a border patrol, look around the edges of the image and see if there's anything distracting that shouldn't be there. And, you know, there's a little distraction here, There's a bright area right near this edge. I'm going to give this one a 6.
Muscovy duck quenches thirst.
Well, it's certainly a good record shot. You can identify the species. It is a Muscovy. I think that that the exposure needs some work, both on the lights and the darks. The whites are really burnt out in this area, and the darks have no detail at all. I think perhaps you could salvage some of that in post-processing, bring down the highlights, bring up the shadows. As presented, though, a 6.
Needs replacement windows.
Well, now this is a little closer to what I was in fact recommending. It's got a little bit of a greenish color cast as I look up in this area, and it looks a little strange to me. I suppose it's possible that that's a reflection of the foliage at the bottom, but it just looks a little strange. And again, as I look around the edges, you know, this corner, just watch your edges. I think it might have been better if it were either cropped out. Well, that's a little more than I meant to crop, but cropped out just below that feature so that it isn't intruding. But I'll take a second look. It certainly is much closer to what I'd recommend, 7.
Okay, now we have 2 left. Hold on a second, gotta admit somebody. On the beach, on the phone.
Okay, that will remain a 7.
Needs replacement windows.
And this one I'll give an 8 and give the top award to.
Right, that's what we're gonna do. Open group 1. First place, Claude. Congratulations. Okay, now moving around to group 2, open.
Okay.
Okay, hold on a second. Needles and threads.
I think this is a really creative view. The lighting is interesting. It's got a few very minor technical flaws. I don't want to be perfectionistic, but you know, these are basic things. This is very close to the top edge. It's not clipped. I mean, I can see well, it's pretty close to being clipped. And you know, these macro shots, I mean, you're sharp right about here, but this entire thread is soft. This thread from here to here is soft, and from here to here is soft. You know, the only part of the image that's sharp is actually right about here. It looks like the eye of the needle is sharp, and everything right within, you know, a millimeter or 2 of that. 2 suggestions. One is to focus stack, and that would be the ideal. And the other, at least, would be shoot it at f/22. You know, you might get a little diffraction, a little bit of softening of the image, but with something like Topaz Sharpen, it would fix it right up. As presented, those 6.
Visitors parking lot.
This is a very chaotic scene. Technically, it looks pretty good. It's sharp. The whites look properly exposed. Again, I just wonder if the maker was trying to capture a little too much. Another situation where I think a less is more. You know, the visitor's parking lot is really the subject, and it's got some humor, but I think I think perhaps I'm just trying to think of the best crop, maybe to keep that red object in and make it a vertical, which would go well with the orientation of the visitor parking sign. Something like that I think might be stronger. I'll give it a 7. Take a second look.
Yellow sky.
Well, I like the rays coming out of the sun. I do think that when you shoot directly into the sun, it's really tough. I mean, I might have tried to do this in 2 exposures, underexpose so that I got the sun a little better rather than just this big white area, and then a proper exposure for the rest of the scene. However, I have to say that as pleasing as the color is, it's really lacking a foreground. These mountains in the distance look nice, but there's nothing really aside from that. You have nothing to anchor it down here. If you had a little bit of a beach and perhaps a breaking wave, I think that would help it very much. I'm going to give it a 6.
2 eyebrows and 3 frame windows.
Well, I try and judge images based on 3 criteria: impact, technical merit, and composition. And of course, they're all interrelated. And I think this one has all 3. I really like this image. It's technically excellent, it's sharp, it's nicely exposed, it's an interesting composition, and it engages my eye and engages my interest. Nothing to really critique about it. I think it's nicely done. 7.
Lily pod.
Interesting post-processing. Looks like somebody overlaid a texture on it. I think that it works nicely. It has a nice mood to it. It's kind of soft, although the flower itself and at least the center area here all look pretty sharp. You get some drop off here in focus, but that's okay. That's not really a critical part. The interest is really with the flower in the central area. And I think it works quite nicely. I like the post-processing on it. 7.
Blue hour over AC.
Well, it's an interesting view. Technically, it's nicely done. You really capture the mood of the blue hour well, and the view is a nice view. Really very small point, and I think already you probably know what I'm going to say. As I do a border patrol, what do I see? I see something that doesn't need to be there. I say to myself, does that need to be there? And the answer is of course no. I don't know if you want to necessarily crop it out because you'd lose a lot of interesting area at the bottom. You could easily clone it or content aware fill it out, but certainly worth a second look. 7.
Raging water in New Hampshire.
Well, you get a nice leading line through the picture. These kind of flowing water shots it's really a matter of taste. I think that I would have preferred to see this with a slightly slower shutter speed. At this shutter speed, it's a little bit chaotic. I don't find the waterfall pleasing at all. And some of the whites in addition, especially here and here, are overexposed. I'm going to give it a 6 as presented.
Campus walkway.
Well, it's an interesting shot. I like the juxtaposition of the figure walking away and these posters on the lamppost. You know, to me at least, it's not a high impact shot. And I'm trying to think if there were a way to present it or to crop it. I think perhaps a little vignetting might help to focus my eye on this area. You know, you have some very bright area. This tree is bright. These trees are bright that draw my eyes away from the central part of interest. But technically it's well done. I'll take a second look. I'll give it a 7.
Oil and water.
Well, that's interesting. You know, it again, I mean, it engages my interest, engages my mind. I'm looking at it, trying to figure out what it is. Technically, it's an interesting piece. It's sharp. 7.
Woman on a bicycle.
Well, you know, they say you're supposed to not shoot people from the back. However, I think that's a rule that can easily be broken and broken well. And this is one of the cases where the shot works, because I think that the interesting part is where she's going, you know, heading up the hill toward this interesting door. The only thing that bothers me is this area. I don't know that you know, this dark part on the side. I just don't know that adds to the narrative, to the picture. It might have been stronger, I think, if it were cropped just to the left of that. Well, that's a little too much to the left, but really right up to the building to keep all of the road and the part where the road intersects this far building. But in general, I think a pretty strong image. 7.
Old knotty rail.
That's an interesting knot. I think it's well placed, a little bit off center. I'm looking at the sharpness though, and it just doesn't quite look tack sharp to me. It also looks just a bit dark. I think a half stop more of exposure, either in the camera in capture or in post-processing, would help it. 6.
Dahlia night sky.
Well, that's a pleasing image. It's the only, I mean, I like the softness. I like the background. I do see some dust spots, you know, and if you're entering your images in competitions, you know, it just takes a few seconds to go around the image with the spot healing brush and take care of those little spots. And the only other improvement suggestion I have is you have very nice detail in the center, except for this area. I would have brought out the shadows a little more there. I'll take a second look. 7.
Praying in AC.
I love the church and I love the way the light hits the spires, tops of the spires. Again, I just think that this is another case where less would be more, where, you know, the crop tool is your friend. And I don't know that all of this area up here adds to the image. I probably would have cropped it down, you know, just to the right of the spires. 6.
Never forget 9/11.
Well, it's certainly a moving image. I think it has emotional impact. I don't know that for me, the white vignetting works. I mean, your eye tends to go to the brightest area, and I think you need a very specific reason to do vignetting other than dark. And I think here it actually would work much better if the vignetting were dark rather than light, to bring my eye more in to this central girder and the flag surrounding it. And I also think that it would help to tone down some of the background. Again, this very bright area, the bright rocks. It's a moving image, but it has, for me at least, too many compositional and technical flaws. I'm going to give it a 6.
Don't fence me in.
Well, it's an interesting image. I think, you know, some people say that title shouldn't matter, that the image should stand on its own, but I think titles guide the viewer, and I'm glad it was titled as it is. You know, I think it's got a few technical problems. Some of the whites are burnt out. You know, the tips of the flower are a little burnt. These are a little burnt. So technically it's got some issues. It's an interesting composition though. I'd like to see it again, 7.
Brick and worn wood.
Well, this is interesting. I think the vignetting works well, drawing my eye in toward the center where this diagonal line of wood, you know, goes up through the brick. The black and white conversion, I think, was done well. I might like to see a little more texture in it, perhaps using the texture slider in Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw, or the clarity slider. But it's a very small point. I just think that might strengthen the image a bit. 7.
One way.
I like the juxtaposition between the diagonals of the one-way sign and its support, and the horizontal lines of that grating over the ventilation shaft. This is a nice geometric image. 7.
Find a yellow rose.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me if this were done by the same photographer who did that earlier flower with the post-processing. Nicely done. I mean, it conveys a nice mood. The rose is soft, although, you know, some parts of it are sharp, which is nice, but this looks sharp. But in general, the post-processing gives it a nice soft look. The texture applied is soft. I'll give it a 7. I'd like to see it again.
Boy on boat.
Well, I like the diagonal of the stairway. I like the placement of the boy and how it contrasts with this kind of gargoyle figure down at the bottom. I think though that there's a sharpness and focus problem. I don't really see anything sharp, and the whites on the stairway are pretty much completely gone, overexposed. The boy himself, I'm not sure if it's just heavily post-processed, but it's a very harsh look, and either he's out of focus or intentionally post-processed that way. But in either case, It's not an appealing look to me. I'm going to give it a 6.
The view from Mount Washington.
Well, it's certainly an expansive vista. I do think, though, that there's much here that doesn't add to the image. I don't know that the sky holds a lot of interest. I might have cropped it about there. And I'm just not sure that, I mean, I see a very small piece of a road here, but you know, the main point of this picture, I assume, is right here. I think it would be much stronger if it were cropped into a pano, something like that. 6.
Golden aspens.
Well, that's attractive. I mean, I think that the aspens are beautiful, you know, the leaves turning yellow. I do think that the aspen trunks themselves are underexposed, and either in the well, I think this might be post-processing, more post-processing than in the camera, because if you expose properly for the aspen trunks, the leaves and the sky would be overexposed. So I think they're properly exposed, but I think you need more exposure on the trunks, perhaps a second exposure just for the trunks and blending them together, or perhaps brightening up the trunks in Photoshop and darkening this corner, which really draws my eye away. I'm going to give it a 6.
Please use the side entrance.
It's an interesting image. I don't know that the subject itself is a compelling one, a really strong one, but you know, the maker did what they could with the image. I'm trying to think what I might be able to suggest that would strengthen it. Perhaps darkening this just a little bit. I mean, your eye tends to go toward the brightest part of the image, when really what you want the person, the viewer, to look at, I suppose, is really here. You know, this red garage door type thing and this opening. I'll take a second look, 7.
Day Lily.
Another interesting image along the same style. Somebody is experimenting with textures. It's nicely done. I think one thing I might do, though, and I thought of that with the other two, but it strikes me more in this particular one, the other 2 flowers, I mean, that were also textured. I think sometimes it looks better if you have less of the texture on the flower itself. And I might have used a brush, assuming the texture is on another layer, and just brushed off with a soft brush with low opacity, brushed off a little bit of the texture on the flower itself so that stands out more from the heavily textured background. I'll see this again, though, 7.
Aspen in B&W, black and white.
Well, the trunks are better exposed here. The problem with this one, however, is that the trunks are still the darker part of the image. And I really think that, you know, you want the eye to go to the trunks, not so much the background. Background in the other, at least you could say it was beautiful leaves, but here, of course, you've bleached out the leaves. They're simply white. I'm going to give this one a 6.
White rose.
Well, this particular image isn't quite as appealing. You know, the center of the rose, which normally is where you want your eye to go to, is very, very soft. The sharpest parts are some of these petals surrounding it. So my guess is they stand out a little more toward the camera, and that's where the plane of focus was. I'm going to give this one a 6.
Okay, round 2, we are going to have 14.
Okay, and remind me, assuming I give some 9s, the 9s are the ones that get the awards, correct?
Right, correct. Otherwise, the 8s if you don't give any 9s.
I got it. 8, 9, 9, 8, 7, 8, 9, 8, 7, 8, 9, 9, 8, 8.
Okay.
So you need a first, second, and third from these.
Yeah. All right, what we're going to do here is,
Yeah, if you can show me,
no,
that's it. Yeah, that's what I want.
I thought you would.
Okay. Okay, the one on the far left with the eyebrows, that'll get first place.
Okay.
The bicyclist, second place. This one, not that flower that you just showed me. That'll get third place.
I also know what they used to be. Okay, open group 2, honorable mention. One Way, Dan, really nice. Line of Yellow Rose, Dave, nice job. Third place, Dave again. Ah, beautiful, Dave. Second place, Woman on a Bicycle, Harvey, nice job. And first place, 2 eyebrows and 3 frame windows, Dan again, beautiful.
Very nice.
Now we're going to do theme, which is pets and animals. And we have 12 photos.
Okay.
Night, night.
Well, this is a nice sharp image of somebody's cat looking right into the camera. And it certainly meets the theme. 2 very small suggestions. Again, watch your edges. You clipped this poor cat's ear, and he's probably protesting over that. And second of all, it has a real flash look. I mean, look at the shadow over here. You know, if you have your flash on the camera, which this clearly was, you're going to get a real harsh look to your image. And if you can get your flash off camera, it really helps. If you can diffuse it a little bit with the softbox, it helps as well. As presented, 6.
Prairie marmot.
Oh, I see. So I was thinking that something was wrong with this shot, but when I look a little more closely, this is one of those topaz creative filters that were placed on it that makes it look fiery. You know, I mean, it's interesting. I have to say that I don't find it that pleasing an effect. You wind up not only with a fiery, you know, the fiery fur, but with a kind of halo around the edge here. I think you need a real reason to put one of those filters on that, you know, it has to somehow, I mean, it can work, but you need a specific reason to do it. And I just don't see it here. 6.
Foal seeks mother's comfort.
Well, this is a really nice narrative. You know, they're both facing the camera. You can see the young horse, you know, nuzzling the mom. That's a really nice interaction. The fence behind them is a little bit distracting. I might have tried to darken it or perhaps blur it a little bit, or perhaps both. But, you know, especially for the beginner's class, I think this is nice work. 7.
I see you.
Well, it's a very graphic presentation, you know, a real close-up of what looks like perhaps a golden eagle. Before I was a photographer, I was a birder, so that's still my first love. However, it's got some significant problems. It is really out of focus. And, you know, there's nothing in the image that is sharp, plus the exposure. All of your whites are gone here. So a little work on the capture would go a long way. 6.
Ready for your close-up?
I like this shot. I think the textures are really interesting. I think it's true that you could criticize it for this part down toward the bottom here, being a little closer to the camera, so being soft. In the future, instead of focusing right on the eyes in a shot like this, you may want to focus more like about here, you know, what they call the hyperfocal distance, about 1/3 of the way into the image. That would give you the most depth of field, both behind and in front of that point. But again, I think for the beginner's class, this is really nice. And it's an interesting picture. It really engages my interest. Another minor thing, I might have brightened up the shadows, especially in that eye. Still, I'm going to see it again. 7.
Dog lost.
Well, I mean, I like the title. It fits the narrative well. I mean, it fits the narrative. It gives a nice narrative to the picture. It guides the viewer, and it becomes more evocative that way. I do think that the dog is a little bit soft, and with animals, and for the most part, this includes pets, you want to try and get down at eye level to shoot it. You don't want to shoot down at the animal, and this shot is taken from above. I'm going to give it a 6.
Follow her.
Well, a dramatic scene. Looks like somebody has been in Africa. It's got a few problems, a few things I think that would strengthen it. One is simply, you know, I think that taking a good photograph is like writing a good paragraph. You have a topic sentence and everything should relate to that topic sentence and support it. In a photograph, you have a subject and everything should relate to that subject and support it. So I'm looking here. I don't think the foreground adds to the narrative at all. And this is one of those cases where I think having the animals facing away from you doesn't help at all. I might have asked the the driver of the vehicle to try and drive around up here so that you could shoot toward them. Having been in Africa sometimes, that's usually what we would do. And of course, that poor male lion is having his tail clipped. He's probably protesting over that. I'm going to give it a 6.
Stand tall.
Mm-hmm. Nice mantis. I'm trying to figure out what that mantis is on, and I can't quite tell. I like this image. I do think it could be strengthened a little bit. I think, again, you want to remove distractions, remove anything that doesn't strengthen the narrative. So this area, and even these pink, whatever you call it, I would tone those down. Your eye goes toward the sharpest, the brightest, the highest contrast, the most colorful, and certainly these are the brightest and the most colorful. And that's not where you want the viewer to be looking. I'll take a second look. I'll give it a 7, but it has some problems with it.
Bear with a purpose.
Well, I love the angle. I love the fact that the bear is looking right at the viewer, right into the camera. I do think that the bear is very, very soft. And I'm not sure if this was done with a flash. Those eyes look like this bear has red eye. So I'm guessing that a flash was pointed right at it. I could be wrong in that. If I am, I apologize, but I'm giving it a 6.
My branch.
Well, it's a very dramatic pose. I think that I like the kind of partial profile that the eagle is giving. I do think that the light is a problem. The most of the face and the front of the bird are in deep shadow. Plus the eagle itself is quite soft. I'm looking and I don't see anything in the eagle, perhaps the tip of the beak that is sharp. So this one gets a 6.
Florida red-bellied cooters.
When you shoot turtles in the water, I have to admit it's hard to get down at eye level unless you want to get wet. So this is one of those cases where I suppose you do have to shoot down. So I'm not going to criticize you for the angle. I think though that, again, I'm looking for something sharp. Now, perhaps this turtle's head is underwater, so we can excuse that, but this one's head is above water, and I just don't see any detail in the head or the face. So between the problem with the light coming from the wrong direction and the face being in shadow, and it looks like it's soft, I'm giving it a 6.
Time for lunch.
Well, I think that the hummingbird itself is well captured. You have some motion, but unless you have a multi-flash set up and all the light is coming from the flare, so you can stop the motion. That's how they're going to look if you shoot it at your own feeder. This is what they'll look like. I do think though that you have some distractions here. This is very bright. This is very bright. I'm trying to think how I might have approached this, and I might have tried to shoot at more of an angle in this direction, and have him be a little bit further away. In fact, if you had got him, let me clear this. If you had gotten him just an inch away from this, you could have cropped out most everything and just had the bird captured in mid-flight. And that's how I might have tried to approach this problem. 6.
Okay, round 2.
So,
Mother's comfort. Excuse me?
So this is round, okay, so
Round 2.
I have 3 left. I'll give this a 9.
Ready for your close-up?
9 as well.
Stand tall.
8.
Okay. We're going to do a first and second on this.
Got it. Okay, the elephant gets first, the horses get second. I think you didn't give the honor. Does the third one get an HM?
Hold on, was it a 9-2?
Oh, that was an 8.
That was an 8.
Okay, never mind.
That's okay. We're all seniors here. See, second place. Fall-seeking mother's comfort. Walter, once again, beautiful job.
Mark, I think
Yes.
that could get a 3rd place. You had 12 photos.
Yeah, all right, then we can do a third. Let's just.
Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay. I was wondering if the third one got some kind of award.
Yeah, hold on. All right. Third place, Flo. Very nice. I really like that photo of that guy. Second place, Walter, once again, beautiful job. And first place, Flo, once again. Wow. Okay.
Nice.
Finished. And we have 29 in here.
Okay.
Group 2, themed pets and animals. Don't you dare.
This is interesting, kind of a blur vignette. I think it works pretty well. It draws my eye in toward the dog giving you the stink eye, and it doesn't want you taking that toy. The whites are a little burnt out, but other than that, I think it's a very appealing image. I'd like to see it again. 7.
Horns.
Well, it's hard to get all these horns in. Those are long horns. It's an interesting image. I'd like to see a little bit of separation. I mean, separation is the wrong word because this is an image where the composition is one where they're all together. But I'd at least like to see more of this face. You know, perhaps if the maker had waited until that bull lifted its head up a little bit, I think it would be a much more interesting image if I could see the faces of all 3 of them. And again, the whites are overexposed. The whites are really gone on this. I hate to keep harping on that, but you know, exposure is important, especially for images that you're putting in a competition. 6.
Hey, kitty.
Well, the cat itself is very striking. I like the presentation of the cat. I do think, though, that the background has a couple problems. This area is so bright and so heavily saturated that I find it distracting. It's drawing my attention away from the cat, and the entire background is really noisy as I look at it on my screen. And in fact, the cat is too, although on the cat it's not as noticeable because of the fur texture. But running it through something like whatever your favorite noise reduction program is. I mean, I love Topaz Denoise, but there are other programs that are certainly less expensive. I'd like to see it again, but it's got some flaws. 7.
Cute chipmunk.
The chipmunk itself, I think, is pretty well presented, although I'd like to see a little more. This looks a little washed out, a little lacking in contrast. And I might have tried to boost the saturation or the contrast a little bit. It just looks a little bleached, a little flat. And the background, this conglomerate is really distracting. I would darken that, blur it a little more because I mean, ideally, quite frankly, you want the chipmunk further away from that background so it automatically goes soft. But since that's not the case, you'd need to deal with that in post-processing. As presented, 6.
On the lookout.
Well, it's an interesting angle, an unusual angle. I might have tried to get a little further away from this skull, simply because, you want, I mean, he's on the lookout, so he's looking out with his eye, with his face, but that occupies at most 5% of the image. The bulk of the image is occupied with his belly. It's, technically it's pretty well done. The exposure is good. I'll take a second look, 7.
Water dog.
Well, I really like the idea. I think it could benefit a little bit in execution. I'd like to see a little more of the face, so I might have waited until the dog was just a little further along and you could get a better view of the face. And the second part is this, you want the viewer's eye to go here, and yet this is so bright that it's really taking my attention away from the subject. 6.
Time to gather up the sheep.
Well, it's a very good story. I like the interaction between the sheepdogs and the sheep. I would like to see a little more of the dogs facing me. If this was occurring over a period of time, I might wait until, if it were possible, and of course I don't know, maybe it wasn't possible, until they were facing me, or at least one of them was facing toward me as they circle around the sheep. But the execution is good. I might have toned down the background a little bit. You have a lot of clutter here in the background, and I understand it gives some context, but I might have vignetted a little bit or softened it a little bit, blurred it just a touch, or perhaps used a wider aperture in the capture to blur out the background a little bit. I'll take a second look though, 7. It's a very nice story.
Icelandic horse and rider.
Again, another nice story. I love the look of concentration on the rider's face. Technically, the exposure is good. The only problem I have, the They're sharp, both the horse and the rider. The only problem I have is this background. It's very bright, it's very busy, it's very distracting. There's an area at the top that has some stuff in it that I don't quite know what it is, but it constitutes a distraction for me. I would have toned that down. You know, if you're using Photoshop and Adobe Camera Raw, you can do a select subject and then invert that selection. You can do the same in Lightroom, and you have the whole background selected, and then just maybe desaturate it, maybe darken it, maybe reduce the clarity a little bit to soften it so that the subject stands out more. But certainly worth a second look. 7.
Hiding squirrel.
Well, I love the idea. The execution is lacking here. Again, I really don't see anything sharp in the image. The squirrel is soft, the branches are soft, the leaves are soft. 6.
Posing.
I think this works well. The black and white conversion works well. It's a pleasing portrait. I might have darkened this kind of horizon line, you know, right below the horizon line a little bit, because the bright line going right through the cat, you know, it's a little bit of a distraction, but that's a very small point. I think overall it's a nice image. Exposure is good. It's nicely captured. 7.
Eagle.
It's an unusual angle for this eagle. You know, I mean, technically, it's very well done. It's sharp, it's tack sharp. The exposure is good. The whites are really all there. The feather detail is there. I'm not sure that I find the angle appealing because you're kind of looking down at the head, and that's not a flattering angle for the eagle. But technically, really nicely done. The only thing I'd suggest as far as post-processing is to tone down some of this distracting background. I'll see this one again, 7.
I've got my eye on you.
The wolf is very nicely captured. Again, be careful about your edges. You're clipping his ear. You know, give him a little more space. It's always good in these kind of shots to give more space than you need. You can always crop in, but and actually in this case, if you wanted to extend the canvas and paint in the tip of the ear, you could do that. I confess I have done that on more than one occasion on these kind of, when I've made this type of small mistake. The only suggestion I'd give in addition to that is the background. And you know what I'm going to say about it, so I don't even need to say much, just tone it down a bit. I'll see this again, 7.
Squirrel snacking on a limb.
Well, I think that this almost silhouette doesn't quite work. I think a shot like this probably was taken by mistakenly allowing your camera on some kind of automatic setting to expose for the sky. And again, I've taken shots like that myself. With this one, you need to do one of two things. You need to compensate up to expose for the squirrel and just let the sky blow out to have a high key shot, or you need to use some fill flash to fill in the squirrel. Or you need to actually expose down another stop and make it a true silhouette. But this partial silhouette that looks like a mistake doesn't quite work. 6.
Blue heron.
Great blue herons are beautiful birds. I think though that this one is a bit underexposed. And again, be careful about your backgrounds. I mean, I know this isn't a nature competition, so you don't have to have a natural background. But when you have a beautiful bird like this and you have a distracting, white fence behind it, it doesn't strengthen the image, it weakens the image. So an exposure problem and a background problem, 6.
Inquisitive kangaroo.
Well, I think the maker got down not quite at eye level, but at least close to it. I think that the background needs a little work. It's very, very busy. I mean, this is quite a lot of clutter back there, and this is quite bright up here. I think you have an evolution as a photographer. And the evolution is that in the earlier stages, we focus on the subject and we finally learn how to get the subject sharp and properly exposed. As we get beyond that, we realize we need to focus just as much or pay attention just as much to the background and make sure the background doesn't detract from the subject and interfere with it or distract from it. So this one gets a 6.
Mind if I lean on you?
Well, it's an interesting narrative. I think that just cropping it would help it a lot. The water is very bright and again draws my eye away from the seals. And I think that the most interesting part of the picture is probably right here. And it would be strengthened a lot by cropping it and maybe extending it a little more here. Something like that would, I think, work pretty well. 6.
Mr. and Mrs.
Well, this is one of those cases where I don't mind at all that in this case, the female lion is partially hidden. I think having her peek out from behind the male's mane is interesting. I'm not sure that I like having her ear clipped, but I won't focus on that too much because this guy is very dramatic. It's a powerful image. I think it works well. It's a little bit noisy, I think. I'm looking at the background and even at the lion itself. Running it through a noise reduction program would help. But still, it's a very strong image. 7.
Bird of prey.
I love the posture of, I think it's probably a Harris's hawk. I'm not 100% sure. I love the posture, raising the wings like that. You know what I'm going to say about the background, so I'm not going to say it. But the eagle itself, or the hawk itself, is quite beautiful. I might have brightened up this area a little bit. Its face is just a touch in shadow. And that of course is the most important part of the image. So I probably would have brightened that just a tad. I'll see it again, 7.
Jackson's chameleon.
Very interesting. I like the chameleon very much. The person's hand, I understand it's a posed shot on somebody's hand. The problem I have is that the hand is so much brighter than the chameleon. I'm just wondering, I like the image and I'm going to see it again, but I'm just wondering if it could have been strengthened by making it a true portrait something like this. I'm just wondering if that might have been more powerful, but I'll see it again, 7.
Getting ready to land.
It's very nicely captured. You know, the ring-bill gull coming in for a landing. I like this, and I think it's a strong image. The kind of post-processing that I think might have helped it a little bit and strengthened it even more is what I described earlier. In Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw, select the subject, you'll get the bird, invert the selection, you'll get the background, and just darken that a little bit. And I think the bird, the gull would stand out even more, but very strong image. I'll give it a 7.
Tasmanian devil waiting for dinner.
Well, it's certainly technically well captured. The exposure is good. I can see detail in all the dark fur. I was going to say feathers. I've been looking at too many birds. The dark fur comes out nicely. The vignetting, I think, works well here. You know, the angle, again, you're looking down at it a little bit. And if there's any flaw in the picture, you know, when you get at eye level with the animals, you kind of get in their world and it's a little more intimate. But other than that, I think it's very nicely captured. I'll see it again, 7.
Hello, Siddha.
I love the angle, the diagonal of the bird's face. I might have tried to capture the feathers, you know, at the top of the crest rather than cut them off. But I don't know, that might be okay with a bird like this in a close-up. I see 2 things that would strengthen it very much. The background, all I'm going to say is the background, and you can reach your own conclusions about the inferences I'm drawing about it and how I'd correct it. And the other thing is that the most important part is really all in shadow. And I might have tried to, you know, there are any number of ways you can throw a little bit of light on the face, a flash off camera. If the light is coming from a window over here, which it looks like it may well be, then just a reflector on the other side. And a reflector doesn't have to be anything fancy. I've used white plates. I've used a white sheet. You know, you don't need a professional kind of reflector, just to bounce a little bit of light into the face and brighten it up. So you need to think of these things in the capture, I think. 6.
Parrot Paradise.
Well, I don't think, I mean, technically the bird is well captured, except for the fact that it's all in shadow. I mean, this is all very bright. I think by now my critiques are fairly consistent, so you can probably predict what I'm going to say. But I want to say one other thing. There are 3 kinds of animal shots, what I call Nessie shots, you know, like the Loch Ness sea monster. They're so poorly exposed and out of focus, can't even tell what it is. The next level up is a record shot, where it's accurately shot, it's sharp, but it's not really that interesting. And the top level is a competition or put on your wall shot. To me, this is a record shot. I mean, the parrot itself is sharp. I can't complain about that, even though I'd like a little more light on it. But there's nothing, I mean, it's a parrot in a cage. And so it's kind of a record shot. 6.
African water buffalo.
I think this is pretty well captured. You know, the maker was at eye level shooting the animal. The animal is doing something, eating some grass in the river. Uh, it's well exposed. It's pretty sharp. The background is not distracting. Looks a little bit noisy. I might run it through a noise reduction program, but other than that, and it's a very minor point. 7, generally a strong image.
Donut, have you seen any donuts?
It's cute. It's a cute shot. You know, I like the title. I think it fits well with the story. Boy, that I just wish everything around this dog weren't quite so bright. I'll see it again, 7.
Mouthful in a snowstorm.
Well, you know, I mean, there's not much you can do when the Junco is in a snowstorm because, of course, you know, snow is bright. I do think that the Junco is just a touch overexposed. It looks a little bleached out. I think I might darken it a bit in either in the capture or in post-processing. And I do think there's some areas of the background, you know, the snow down here at the bottom is really nicely captured. I can see detail, but you have some areas around this Junco that are just completely lacking in any detail. So I think overall, the image is probably a half a stop or so overexposed. 6.
His master's voice.
I love the posture of the dog, and I love the interaction between the dog and the, what are they called? Are they trainers? The ones who walk the dogs? I forget what they call them. You know, the background is a little distracting. I wish this fence weren't there. In this particular case, though, I love this guy clapping. I'm assuming that this dog just won an award or maybe just finished a walk and they're clapping because the walk is done and they're just clapping for the dog. You know, it's a really good narrative despite its flaws. I'll see it again, 7.
Friendly iguana.
Well, the iguana itself is beautifully done. I mean, the exposure is good, sharp as a tack from top to bottom. You know, the background, I think, needs a little work. It's distracting. The bright area in front of the iguana could be darkened. The wood chips or whatever they are to the back of the iguana could be desaturated and softened. And some of these bright spots could be toned down. But the iguana itself is terrific. I'd like to see it again, 7.
I got the blues.
Really nice shot. The two suggestions that I think might strengthen it. One is, of course, to get a little bit lower, to get a little closer to eye level. You know, to really, I think it would be more intimate that way. And the second is around the eyes. I would just bring out the shadows a little more to give it a little more detail. But you know, other than that, those are very minor points. Nice shot, 7.
Hold on a second. Got a little problem here. Hold on. Okay.
I got a lot of 7s to look at, don't I?
Yep, I sure do. 18 of them.
Okay.
Okay, starting off, don't you dare.
8.
Hey, kitty.
8.
On the lookout.
7.
Time to gather up the sheep.
7.
Icelandic horse and rider.
9.
Posing.
9.
Eagle.
8.
I've got my eye on you.
8,
Mr. and Ms.
9,
Bird of prey.
8,
Jackson's chameleon.
8,
Getting ready to land.
9,
Tasmanian devil waiting for dinner.
7,
African water buffalo.
9,
Donuts. Have you seen any donuts?
8,
His master's voice.
8,
Friendly iguana.
8,
I got the blues.
9.
We have 6 now.
First, second, and third, correct?
First, second, third, and the rest are honorable mention.
Okay. Okay. This, the cat, next one over. That's first. The Icelandic horses are second, or the horse singular rather, second.
Okay.
And now I have a tough one. I'll give the Lions third. They're all nice shots.
Okay. Themed pets and animals, group 2. Honorable mention, getting ready to land, Mario, really nice. African water buffalo, Harvey, once again, beautiful shot. I got the blues, Bobby. Reminds me of my old dog, really. Third place, Mr. and Mrs. Bobby again, wow. Second place, Icelandic horse and rider, Sandy, way to go. And first place, posing, Bobby. Bobby, tonight's your night. Okay.
Very nice images. Any questions, any comments?
Yeah, early on you mentioned focus stacking. I've heard the term before. Can you tell us how you do that?
Sure. Of course, you have to be on a tripod. And if you have something like a flower with a lot of depth of field, you take multiple shots, one focused here, one focused here, one focused here, and so on, until you have the whole flower, you know, all sharp in multiple shots, bringing it to Photoshop or into their programs that specialize in merging them all together. Heliofocus or Heliostack, I forget the name of it, but when I do it just in Photoshop, and you can bring it into Photoshop. And you know, I don't want to go through the whole technique, but you can Google it, and you'll get a dozen different YouTubes on how to stack them in Photoshop.
Just in one sentence, I mean, do you have to bring each one in and each one is a layer? And I mean, how do you,
yes,
your technique
yes.
or?
Yeah, you bring them in, they're all in separate layers. And then you can, there's a procedure you use to blend all the layers together, and Photoshop will figure out which part of each layer is sharp and just use that part to give you a composite image.
Do you know if you can do that with Elements?
I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
No other question, but in case you want to know, the praying mantis was sitting on the mail, a bow on the mailbox. In Stonebridge, we have an October Cancer Month, and that was the pink bow, in case you wanted to know.
Very interesting. Okay. Thanks. I appreciate it. I couldn't figure out what it was on. I was trying to imagine, but I never thought of a bow. Well, I hope you found the feedback helpful. You know, some clubs like the various post-processing suggestions, other clubs don't. I try and give some useful comments, so I hope they were helpful.
Mm-hmm.
They were, in my opinion, very helpful, and I'm sure our club appreciated all the post-processing because most of us are into that. So I thank you very much. Any other questions?
Okay. Well,
congrats, winners. Beautiful pictures.
They were very nice. Thanks for having me. I'll sign off then.
Okay, good night.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, guys.